can I just rant, please?
Okay, go for it.
Okay.
Do it.
So when you look at this concept, we've been seized with violence against black people, especially police brutality against black men and black people. And you apply your mind and saying, what is the real cause of this thing? And at the end of the day, you find that there is racism, there is the disempowerment element. And when you delve deeper and deeper, and I've been watching the news reports, and when people being asked, so what are you asking for? So you're asking for this to end so that people can stop racism. So racism has been there for thousands and thousands of years, and it has never gone. And so just by then asking people to stop being racist, is that going to change anything? What is the real demand that people are asking for? And what you find is that sometimes you don't get any concrete answers in terms of what are the demands. And so for me, it reminded me of the notion of fees must fall. To say, yes, fees must fall, so you must have free education. But there was something incomplete about this, because when you take the sky view and you look at the thing from beginning to this logical conclusion, what is missing? And so while the problems are there in terms of black lives do matter, because they are also human beings like everybody, they have potential that needs to be unleashed, they have the rights that they need to be able to have in terms of voting, in terms of being able to live with dignity. And so, on the one hand, one can understand freedom from the effects of racism, from the acts of racism. But there's a missing element to say, what are you free for? And this became also very stark when we talk about coronavirus. And we're saying in coronavirus, the lockdowns were there to enable to flatten the curve. After a certain element, there was a breaking point beyond which, if the lockdown continued, people were saying, we don't give a damn anymore. We just want to go and work. And therefore, there was a stark questions between lives versus livelihood. People understood you need to preserve lives, and you need to be able to make sure that you have as little or as less people getting exposed to the virus as possible, but at the same time you need to continue with livelihoods. So when the first action of lockdowns took place, people were happy to bring down the level of infections. However, there was that breaking point that says, now this is going overboard, because now our livelihoods are affected. Now we're not going to be able to live, because we can prepare and avoid the virus, but how are we going to be able to live even if we don't have the virus? And therefore people wanted to have a balance. And that is what is missing for me with the Black Lives Matter. It's important definitely to be able to put the Black Lives Matters, but there's another side of the coin, that it's actually the black livelihoods that also complement the Black Lives Matter. Because once you have the lives, what are you having the life for? What are you going to be doing with that life? And that's where black livelihoods matter, because it complements, you need to save a life, but you also need to have a black livelihood that enables you to be the best that you can be, to have no barriers for you to participate in society. And right now, that's why apartheid was there. It was a political barrier, it was an economic barrier, it was a social barrier that was put in there. But now we needed to dismantle the apartheid in South Africa. And there's the same kind of dismantlement of apartheid that is taking place in America and other parts of the world, where black people are being attacked by the police, by the system, by the jail system, by the justice system. And therefore, when you look at Black Lives Matter, absolutely we believe in that. But we need to build on, once those lives have been spared, what are you living for? What is the purpose? And that is why black livelihoods matter. Now let's unpack what we mean by black livelihoods matter. It means that, firstly, economically speaking, from the economics point of view, black livelihoods matter. That they need to be able to have the basics covered. That they need to be able to build something for themselves. Right now, there are economic barriers that are put in place that does not enable black people to thrive economically. And therefore, we need to remove those barriers. And it's the barriers of, like, there might be procurement barriers, might be employment barriers, might be getting the basics kind of barriers. We need to be able to deal with that, because if those barriers are not removed, then the black livelihoods are not going to actually materialize, and they do matter. That is why, therefore, one, we need to get rid of those economic barriers. Two, there are political barriers, especially in America, whereby if you've been accused of a felony, you cannot be able to vote. So that means that it interferes with your political right to actually have a say, whether it's at the local level, whether it's at the state level, or whether it's at the federal level. That becomes important to be able to have those political rights, the ability to vote, the ability to have your say. So that's another barrier on the livelihood, because if you do not have the ability to have a say, the ability to be secure, because that's a political right, to be secure and live in the neighborhoods knowing that you're not going to be attacked, knowing that you're not going to be accosted by the cops just because you're black and ask you, what are you doing here? That's an important element. Therefore, in Black Livelihoods Matter, that needs to be addressed, to say, what are the political freedoms that black people need to be able to get to enable the black livelihoods to actually thrive. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, social empowerment. Socially, there are social barriers that do not make black livelihoods to matter. And therefore that creates this shell that is being used to try to box black people in. And that is being able to have the ability to move socially, to be able to also give back as a black person to your ecosystem, and to be able to be fed by your ecosystem in terms of then, because we're social creatures, and especially in South Africa, we have this principle called Ubuntu. I am because we are. And that is an inherent thing that we need as a black community, to say, I'm not complete if I don't have my community. That's why you find black people having extended families. They take care of their aunts and uncles of uncles of uncles and so forth. So you might have one breadwinner having 20 people relying on them. They don't look at the nucleus of a family as just being restricted. And that is the social empowerment that is inherent in the black livelihoods, that needs to be encouraged, that needs to be, whatever barriers that are put in there, they need to be removed for the black livelihoods to matter. And then you get into the fourth element of black livelihoods that matter. The fourth element is mental empowerment, the ability to identify, to solidify your identity. You need to be able to enjoy your identity before you can be able to say, all lives matter. No, you cannot transcend something that you don't have. It's like a poor person says, I'm transcending riches because, and they are poor, they've never experienced riches, and therefore they can then say, oh, I'm going to transcend riches. That's bullshit, because they're not transcending anything. They can't transcend what you don't have. So it's the same thing with identity. For you to be able to then go beyond black, you need to experience what blackness is. You need to own it. You need to be invested in it, immerse yourself in it. And then you can then be able to then say, I know what blackness is. And you're able to have the ability to open up to all other races. If you go and say that you transcend blackness without having experienced blackness, you are lying. you're a fake because you're transcending stuff that you don't have. And let's give a practical example, maybe from a spiritual level. Buddha. You know, Buddha, for him to be able to say, I renounce the riches, he was rich. He had everything that he wanted until he saw suffering. And then when he saw suffering, he was able to see the contrast from where he was living to this level of suffering that was there. And therefore, he was able to then explore suffering because he came from the riches. And therefore, he had a much fuller kind of experience. And that's when he received his enlightenment, because he went to the other extreme of being an ascetic, of saying, denouncing the world, denouncing everything. And when he had opulence and abundance, that was one extreme. And then he went to the other extreme of then denouncing everything. And at the end of the day, he never got enlightenment by denouncing anything. He never got enlightenment by being poor. And he never got enlightenment by being rich. What happened is that when he experienced all these, then nothing held him back. He was able to transcend. He was able to give up something that he had experienced. Now, if you're asking black people to accept that all lives matter, and they don't even get rooted in Black Lives Matters, you're asking them an impossible thing to do. You're asking them to be fake, because it's not going to happen. So they need to be able to be rooted in their identity. They need to enjoy their identity. They need to be able to be immersed in their identity. And therefore, they can be able to then have an ability to embrace everything else. Because if they don't do that, you can't transcend what you don't own. Therefore, it would be inauthentic of them to be able to just say all lives matter when they themselves do not appreciate their own lives. They do not appreciate their blackness. They do not own their blackness. And therefore, the self-affirmation needs to happen before you can be able to transcend. You can't transcend something you've never experienced, because that is going to be inauthentic. That is going to be synthetic transcendence. And that is bullshit, because it means that it's not going to have any impact to move the dial. Therefore, Black Lives Matter, and that Black identity matter. Black consciousness matters. And once you've been rooted in that and appreciate that, then you can then be able to transcend. And Jesus said, you should love your neighbor as you love thyself. It's a very basic thing. How can you love your neighbor when you don't have your love for yourself? Then that love is fake. That love is not real. That love doesn't come from a deep point. And therefore, that love is going to be fickle. And therefore, you as a black person being immersed in your black identity and understanding and owning your identity, that's when you can then be able to be in a position to transcend. Or else, you're just playing games. You're just changing the cover, but everything stays the same. And therefore, you never actually know who you truly are. And therefore, mental empowerment, that self-empowerment, is really critical. Owning your blackness, enjoying your blackness, then you can then be able to appreciate other cultures. And also when we say we're colors of the rainbow, now you look at the color of a rainbow. If the color of the rainbow, there's 7 colors in the rainbow, and if the red did not own its redness, it has nothing to add to the rainbow. When it mixes with the other colors, you're not going to have then one white color. So each color of the rainbow is able to assert itself and be able to express what it is without having to be able to saying, I want to be like green, I want to be like indigo. No, each color of the rainbow needs to show up as its color. And that's why black people need to show up as black people with their idiosyncrasies, with their nuances, with their quick key actions, whatever. It doesn't matter. That's what brings them to the party. That's what they can be able to add as one color of the rainbow. And to be able to say all colors of the rainbow matter when you don't appreciate your color of the rainbow, that's very hollow. And therefore the self-empowerment element, the mental empowerment element, the owning of your identity element enables you to then appreciate that all lives matter. And also that means that for you to be able to do that, you need to be able to unleash the things that make you who you are, the things that bring that uniqueness, rather than trying to be somebody else, because there's never going to be another person like you. And therefore, if you try to blot out the blackness in things, then there's a thing that is missing in the whole of existence. If we try to blot out the fact that black lives matter, then you're going to be losing one color of the rainbow. And then when all those colors mix, you're never going to have the uniform color, and that is white, because all the colors emerge from that. When all the colors are mixed, then you have just whiteness that is there. And therefore, the last part on Black Livelihoods matter is the spiritual empowerment part, that you need to be able for your livelihood to actually emerge, to be blooming and blossoming. You need to be spiritually rooted. Spiritually rooted, not in any religious perspective. Spiritually rooted from wherever you are. You could come from the African roots, from the black roots. That means you need to be able to honor your ancestors. That's what then adds depth to the spirituality. Because you see, all these religions are borrowed knowledge. I mean, Christianity is only 2,000 years. Islam is much later than Christianity, and Hinduism is much older. But all these religions, at the end of the day, are just borrowed their thoughts. And therefore, black people need to be able to appreciate their own depth of spirituality, their ancestors. Because at the end of the day, the people that live in here, these are my ancestors. I'm here physically because of my ancestors. I'm not here physically because of Jesus. No, Jesus is my spiritual ancestor, and he has a place. I'm not here because of Buddha. I'm not here because of Krishna. I'm not here because of Muhammad. I'm here because of my physical ancestors, that I'm having this experience, the physical experience. And those are the ancestors. They have some spiritual impact, because Jesus had a lot of spiritual impact. Abraham had a lot of spiritual impact. And there might be other African mystics from Egypt, from the Hemis, that have a lot of spiritual impact. But by me being rooted in my physicality and appreciating the physical ancestors whose blood is coursing through my veins, that means that I'm appreciating everything. And therefore, I can be able to transcend the body and then be able to appreciate all these other spiritual ancestors. But if I'm going to dishonor the physical ancestors that I live with every single day, that are more real to me than all those spiritual ancestors, then you're asking me to actually say my livelihood as a black person doesn't matter. My physical presence, I owe it to those physical ancestors. And this body that I'm living in, it's a temple that was built from the blood of those ancestors. And therefore, I need to honor this temple, because this temple is then going to enable the other ancestors, the intellectual ancestors, the spiritual ancestors, the economic ancestors, if they are, to be able to flourish. Because if I don't have this body, I'll never be able to understand about all these religions. It's game over. And therefore, I need to be able to appreciate this spirituality anchored in this existence, in this human life. Without this human life, I'll never be able to get any master to understand about spirituality, because then I could be in different spheres, in the astral regions, in the spiritual regions. Therefore, I would not be able to have the same kind of experience and the depth of progress that I can be able to make spiritually, because I've been given this body in order to be able to appreciate it. Once I appreciate it, then I can be able to transcend. And those are the different elements when we then talk about Black Livelihoods matter. And who are the first people that need to understand that? It's us as black people. Because sometimes we sell ourselves short because we're trying to be something else that we're not, that we're never ever going to be. So why would I try to be like any other person and be a carbon copy? Because there's only one Wojciech, and there will only be one Wojciech in this entire existence who's experienced things that I have, who's experienced all these elements, these connections that I've had. It's never going to happen again. It's only happened once, because this universe, nature, doesn't make carbon copies. Nature does not create any other thing. There's no straight line, for example, in nature. There's no apple that will ever be like any apple. That's how abundant nature is. And therefore, I need to be able to appreciate that abundance of who I am first, before I can be able to make others try to understand that black livelihoods matter. So I need to take my livelihood seriously. I need to take my economic livelihood and saying, what am I doing? What am I investing in terms of skin in the game to my economic empowerment? What am I doing to invest in my political empowerment? What am I doing to invest in the social empowerment and the social ecosystems that I'm going to be creating that need to feed into that livelihood, that will be able to unleash that livelihood? And then I need to be able to look and say, how am I mentally empowered? What is my identity? Can I be able to be rooted in my identity despite what everybody else is saying, despite everybody trying to hook my attention capital to invest in their identities? Can I be invested in my identity so that the more I invest in my identity, that's where the value comes in. That's where the livelihood gets to be built and appreciated, and I can be able to then attract other people's attention capital by being able to be rooted in my livelihood, and by me being rooted in my spirituality that appreciates my physical ancestors, that appreciates my intellectual ancestors, that appreciates my spiritual ancestors, that appreciates some ideological ancestors. Then I can then be able to then showcase that black livelihoods matter, because I would have saved that black life, but I need to take it to the next level and say, having saved that black life, I shall sin no more by wasting that black life. I will then be able to build that black life and build that black livelihood so that I then leave a legacy. Then I can be a physical ancestor to somebody. I can be a mental ancestor to somebody. I can be an intellectual ancestor to the generations that come after me. And because I've been able to recognize that my black life matters, but it also enables me to appreciate that that black life matters when the black livelihood is built. And when the two come together, there's two sides of the same coin. That's how we're going to leave a legacy. And that's how we're going to be able to invest in attention capital to be able to leave a legacy. Why we don't leave a legacy is because we only look at one side of the equation. Because yes, we can save lives, but what for? What is the livelihood? What is the legacy that is then being built by that life? And therefore, one iterates Black Lives Matter. That's one side of the coin, mixed with black livelihoods matter. And that's how we're going to leave a legacy.